Well, welcome to another Cutting Edge show where we discuss all things health and wellness, COVID 19, and beyond. I'm Omar Neal. I'm one of your hosts of this great show. I'm the former mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama, as well as the host of the You Got the Power radio talk show. Today, we're going to have a great show today. We're going to talk about freedom delayed but not denied, the struggle towards emancipation of African Americans. We got a wonderful star lineup for you. Dr. Marva Robinson, who is the past president of the St. Louis chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists. We have Dean Adrian Wing, who is the Associate Dean for International and Comparative Law programs at University of Iowa School of Law. And then we have Dr. Afia Mbilishaka, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and CEO of the founder of Psycho Hair Therapy, Hair Therapy at LLC. We'll talk about that. That's a whole nother thing that we need to talk about. But anyway, we are so pleased to have them on again. They are all backed by popular demand. They've all been on the cutting edge before, and I look forward to a very engaging conversation. Well, one of the things that we do here is we tag team. I got my brother from another mother to whom we've been together now doing this for close to 3 years. We have done over 100 shows in some format. He is the professor of the University of Maryland School of Public Health and director of the Maryland Center for Health Equity. He is a sought-after expert in the area of public health. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my dear friend, my brother, and my co-host, Dr. Stephen B. Thomas, we better known as Dr. T. Hey, Dr. T, how you doing?
Hey, Mayor, it's so good to see you, my friend. And what an amazing moment we're in to continue to provide people with the information they need to not only save their own lives, but to save the lives of their families, to be role models in the community at a time when folks are throwing caution to the wind.
Right.
Mayor, I just gotten back from a vacation over the pond, overseas. And, sometimes they say the mountain is more clear to the climber from the plain. And I am telling you, the question to me was, what happened to America? What's going on over there? And it reminded me of the significance of what we're doing right here. As soon as I got back in country and look at the newspaper and turn on a TV, I mean, it is nothing but drama and distraction from the pandemic. So we got a lot of work to do, and what a lineup we have today.
Oh man, we got a lot to talk about. Not only we're talking about Juneteenth, as you know, we just celebrated Juneteenth last week, and so we'll talk about that. But think about it. We got today. Now Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
That's right.
I mean, that is huge. And I think when we put it in historical context, we'll really understand that this is a moment to put a pin in, highlight, circle it, because it is a historical moment.
Absolutely.
We can't do this by ourselves. It's our team behind the scene. It's headed up by Meg Jordan, our technical director, Maggie Daly, assistant technical director, Saraya Khan, who is our social media and communications guru, and of course, Kimmy Fleming, social media and media curator, and of course, our sound designer, Elijah Pugh Jr.
I saw
people make us, you see me bobbing my
there
head.
You go.
I can't help myself. It's automatic. But these are the individuals, Doc, that make us look good. I mean, really, you cannot overstate how important those people are that are behind the scene to make this program run as smoothly as it does. So we give our salute and kudos to our whole team. Thank you all so much for what you do.
Absolutely, Mary. And you know, it wouldn't be possible without the support of the University of Maryland School of Public Health that provides the platform for us to
Yeah,
reach out. And if the
absolutely.
pandemic has done anything, it's helped people understand the difference between medical care
Right,
and public health. This
right.
is a public health framework, and I think our people need it now more than ever.
Absolutely. So we are appreciative of the University of Maryland School of Public Health for believing in us. I mean, this is, and we get into a whole lot of issues,
That's right.
and all of which we can um, justify as being public health issues. However, we get into some areas that uh, re- relate to our theme, the cutting edge,
There you
right?
go.
So, we go ahead and go ahead of things and cut into areas that are controversial sometimes, but it's all done in love, and it's all done in seeking truth, believing
That's right.
that we all are possessors of some truth. And as we bring our truths together, then and only then do we get closer to the truth, you know? So, people can follow us, and hang out with us on all of these platforms. We got social media platforms on lockdown now.
There
We
you
got
go.
Facebook, uh, our YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. It's so important that you do that because we're trying to build our following. We believe that we have something special,
Indeed.
and we believe that you can assist us in really expanding this platform out to areas where people can benefit from this kind of authentic exchange. So thanks for doing that. Also, you can check our newsletter out. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We do it each and every week. Even when we're off, we do it. So every week we have our newsletter, so you can subscribe. It gives you a lot of information about what's happening in the space of health and wellness, but it also let you know what we're doing here on the cutting edge. You can see previous shows, vignettes of our previous guest, and just a plethora, a litany of things you can get from that newsletter. It's a wonderful resource. So make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter.
And share it with your friends and your network. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let me tell you this, man. We talk about chemistry and bringing people in that we believe kind of will will balance off and offset each other. But when you get three people that's stars like this, you don't know what to do, man. You just say, okay, y'all go ahead. I almost want to just sit back and just watch. I don't I don't even want to host this show. I just want to sit back and say, y'all go and talk. I just want to hear y'all. I just want to hear what y'all got to say. But anyway, I got to do my work. So let me do this. Let's bring up Dr. Marva Robinson first.
All right. All right.
Dr. Marva Robinson is the past president of the St. Louis chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists. And of course, she's been here before. And for those who have had the opportunity to be in our presence or know about her work, she's a dedicated person. She has chosen to operate in the area of clinical psychology, practicing in St. Louis, Missouri. She completed her master's and doctorate studies at in clinical psychology at in forensic, clinical psychology at Nova Southeastern University.
All right. Get it
So,
right. Yep.
so they got to get it right. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our special guest, Dr. Marva Robinson.
All right.
How
We
you doing,
snapped for
Dr.
that.
Robinson?
Yeah, we snapped
Thank
for that.
you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
having me.
It's
Thank you
so
for the
good to
invite.
see you. Oh, it's so good to see you
Good to
again.
see you all too.
Good. I hope you're ready for this conversation. Let me tell you something that happened to me, Dr. Robinson. I was my sisters and I were cleaning out and organizing my mother's home. She passed 2 years ago, and this is the first time that we went through her things, and we came up on a Bible, which was her mother's Bible. Her mother purchased the Bible in 19, right?
Wow.
But she was born in 1898, right? Her mother and father were slaves. So my great grandparents were slaves. My mother's mother, grandparents were slaves, right? So I look back at my father's mother and father, grandparents were slaves. So my great grandparents, not so far removed,
Right.
were slaves. So when people talk about, it was centuries ago, well, this country is not much over 500 years, right? So we are direct descendants from that institution. And I think
Absolutely.
it's so important that we keep in perspective that we are not that far removed, and that the vestiges and the residual impact of that subjugation still remains with us. And that's one of the things I wanted to discuss today. And I'm so happy you're here to help us unpack that.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, we are not that far removed, not just chronologically, but socially, economically, um, power differential. So when you see individuals fighting the fight and bringing these things up in the workplace, in churches, in social settings, and you may hear some people say, oh, but that was years ago, or, oh, but so much improvement has happened. Well, I would challenge that. I mean, just think, just last year, we were all on the edge of our seat, couldn't believe that there was a pause in even the Voters' Rights Act being renewed. I mean, just think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought that was a big deal. Here we are, post the overturn just last week of Roe v. Wade. So how chronologically how close we are to when we were enslaved, though those consequences are still very much prevalent. That's why, I'm in clinical psych. We are constantly fighting against things like healthcare disparity, right? And that although I may not currently be physically enslaved, the fight I have with primary care doctors and dentists and in workplace and with HR, just to be treated equitably, that is still the consequence that we struggle with. And so you're right. I mean, we are not that far removed, and we're seeing this play out in our politics. We see it play out in social programming. We see it play out when we look at Fortune 500 companies and we look at leadership versus those that are on the ground working. So we are not that far removed. And that's why that fight still has to be there. And that's why there are some of us, a lot of us, those here on this call, that continue to help push this agenda forward, because we still have a long way to go.
Dr. Robinson, I saw in your profile the work that you do on the mental health of people of the African diaspora.
Yes.
Okay. And the conversation we're having right now, you're talking, Omar's talking about the ultimate trauma in his own family tree. Is that generational? Can that trauma be passed on? And do events like what we're seeing now trigger that trauma again?
Absolutely. It absolutely. So trauma and its passing on definitely can be intergenerational. I mean, we are all descendants of the intergenerational trauma from enslavement, from our lack of trust in certain domains, how aware we are when we walk into certain rooms and situations, and we quickly recognize we may be the only ones, or we search for someone else that looks like us or a safe space, knowing where we can and can't go in terms of safety, driving down the street. I mean, lynching was not that far ago. And so when we see images of Black and brown bodies being laid out in streets, or being choked to death publicly in viral videos, those images and those memories are re-triggered. The stories that we heard growing up about this cousin or that grandparent that went through that or witnessed that, those stories do carry on. And it also carries on in the behaviors of how we train and raise our children, because we are very aware of who we are and where we are. And so it definitely does carry on. I mean, and even biologically, you'll hear a lot of physicians that talk about high blood pressure and diabetes in the sense of diet and exercise. But what they
Yes.
don't talk about is that race-based trauma is real. And it's that being constantly in that fight or flight mode that does increase blood pressure, that does lead to things like diabetes. So even genetically and biologically and dealing with those illnesses, those things do carry on. And unfortunately, it's not as if it's a trauma where it was a natural disaster and now the hurricane is gone and we can focus on healing. This is every day. This is our everyday existence. So how do you continue to survive when the threat and the thing that traumatizes you is still an everyday present force?
How can you heal when you're constantly being assaulted?
Absolutely.
So that's
Mayor,
a powerful thing. Yeah.
I know. I just want to pin here, even for the other guests. I come back from vacation, open up the newspaper, big story. The Commissioner of Health for the state of Virginia publicly says racism is not a public health issue. Now, the story in the paper is trying to clean it up afterwards, but the damage is done. You see what we're up against? Our profession, yes, Mayor, the medical and the public health have to look in the mirror as well and do our reckoning.
Right. That's where you have credibility, Dr. T, when you can say that, and you being, a poster child for public health, and for you to say that, that means volumes for people. And maybe everyone in every profession needs to do some introspective work, right? And so, and to include psychology, right?
Absolutely.
So we got
it's connected. Brain body behavior. I mean, there is no separation between the two. Absolutely.
Let me bring some more folk on for we had this whole show. Let's bring on our next guest. Let me say this, to have the Dean, Adrian Wing, with us, who is Associate Dean of International and Comparative Law Programs and Professor at the University of Iowa College of Law. Dr. Wing was with us, I don't know how long ago, but she has this presence about her. She reminds me of when we had the Black Panthers, that kind of spirit, of a power, of a unapologetic truth teller. Right. That's what we want. That's what we need. This country needs people to tell it the truth.
There you go.
Right. We can, isn't it something that says, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's not just for individuals, that's also for this country. So I am so appreciative to have Dean Adrian K. Wing hanging out with us again. Please join me in welcoming my dear friend, Dean Wing. How you doing?
Dean Wing.
Hey, Dean.
A snap for her. Come
doing
on,
well.
man.
Glad to be back.
Oh, wonderful. We Dr. Robinson really kicked the ball off, right? And so we are literally talking about vestiges of that peculiar institution called slavery, right? And how it's manifest in our communities today, how even maybe the violence that we find hurt people, maybe the microaggressions that we don't really understand, that's continuously assaulting us with little paper cuts continuously, may have some impact on our health, as Dr. Robinson alluded to. All of this is working together, and for people to deny racism as being the corporate in most, if not all of this, I think is disingenuous. The other thing, and I'll say this, and I want to hear your voice. If you do not understand racism, then anything else you think you understand will only serve to confuse you. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Adrian Wing.
That's correct. And I'm part of a a group of people who do something called critical race theory.
Whoa, there you are.
Wow.
Which
That's a
went
bad
from
word.
almost
Woo.
nobody knowing it to now everyone in different countries even knows it. And unfortunately, what they know is not correct and is, all of the stereotypes. But the bottom line is that we look at systemic racism. You can't understand the United States unless you understand systemic racism. And so now we have 30 states that have passed different types of law that are forbidding the teaching about race.
Can you
Not just critical race theory. Most of these laws don't even mention critical race theory, but they don't want our children and our communities to know this history that even led up to why are we having a Juneteenth holiday.
There you go.
They don't want the young people, they don't want the school systems to know about these issues. And as we all see, things are moving backward, not forward, backward. And you won't understand that it's moving backward unless you know where we came from and where certain elements are pushing us back. And unfortunately, the successes we've had in certain areas, like having Black people on the Supreme Court. Right now, we have 2 Black people on the Supreme Court. But as we know,
that's debatable.
One's a termite.
People are as opposite.
You can say what you want.
They're as opposite as you could get. They're as opposite as you could get. And I know, like many, when Thurgood Marshall retired, and then you got Clarence Thomas, some people said, "Oh, he's going to turn out all right," and he's turned out just like many of us thought. He's an embarrassment and a disgrace to sit in the chair of Thurgood Marshall. Well, now he's pushed out. He's not in that chair. Sister Ketanji Brown Jackson has just been, appointed today. She is in that legacy, and she is not scared. She's not going to be quiet on the bench like him, and she's going to speak out. So that's going to be amazing. On the other hand, she is going to be in a minority of 3 people who are the liberals on that court. And it could be for 20 or 30 years, we could have a majority Supreme Court where elements of which Clarence Thomas is just one of them who want to push us backward will be in the ascendance. And so this is what is very, very scary at this particular moment. And as we know, was mentioned by the doctor, Roe v. Wade was overturned last week. And this fall, there's a case before the court, the Harvard case, Harvard and UNC, that's about affirmative action. And we fully expect they're going to overturn, abolish affirmative action, abolish back to Bakke, and we will be where we were 50 years ago, when there were almost no Black people in many of the historically white institutions. That's this fall that's going to happen.
Dean,
as well as some others.
When the mayor introduced you, he talked about your truth telling, and we're going to need that more than ever. And in your profile photo, I just want to resonate with you. I just love the TAM. Come on now, whether it's Black Panther Party or whatever it is. The point is, we got to be identified out there. The mayor says, all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Right.
That's right.
And so I've had people come up to me because there's a Black person in a certain position that's taking us backwards and saying, I should just automatically agree with that person. We got to separate ourselves, make a distinction, and stand up for what we believe in and do it loud and proud more than ever. And I'm thinking that this whole health arena, this social determinants of health, this path we have carved here in the pandemic is a way to bring us back together. It's a way to bring us back together.
You're right. One thing that I can say, our new Justice Brown Jackson, her mother graduated from Tuskegee then Institute, now University.
All right.
So we know where she comes from, right? So we are very confident that she will do what is right by all people. One is, and it's so disheartening to think that a justice system is partisan, right? And that we move to a place where people are talking about liberals versus conservatives in a justice system. And is that, Dean, I want to ask you this, is that the antithesis of justice to even think from that vantage point?
I don't think it's necessarily the antithesis of justice, because I don't care what area you're in. There's conservatives or reactionaries all the way up to progressives, such as our Black Panthers and others from our heritage, people like Du Bois and others. So there's always been, these poles with everything in between. And that's going to be the case. And it's in every field, whether we're talking about health, medicine, or law, or architecture, or whatever. You're going to have these ebbs and flows, and you can't judge by the color, right? As we know, Justice Breyer, who's stepping down, was progressive, and Clarence Thomas, it has never been. And I'm just waiting to see, is he going to be a vote to overturn the Loving decision of 1967, which permitted whites and Blacks to get married? So what, you're going to invalidate your own marriage?
Now, Dean Ween, you know he's not going to do that. When I heard somebody, I know Dr. Robinson or somebody said that, that is not going to happen. He'll do everything else but that. Right. That's not something that he's going to do. So that, I want to start. Let me bring on my next guest. Thank you all so much, man. I'm so you see, I'm so excited about this. All right, let's bring on our last and final panelist, Dr. Afia Mbili-Shaka. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and CEO and founder of Psychotherapy.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, LLC, she literally does hair, and she has created a kind of a mixture of psychology and hair. And I have not heard anyone else in the world do this. So she's got to be some kind of special. Indeed. And she is. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our final panelist for this extraordinary show, Dr. Afia Mbili-Shaka.
A snap for her. Come on now.
All right. Dr. Mbili-Shaka, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm excited to be here and be amongst these panelists. I'm all taking notes on constitutional law over here. So it's exciting.
You are in the clinical psychology area. And what we're talking about is the kind of collective psychosis that is taking place in the African-American community. And people talk about the fact that much of what we are experiencing is at the subconscious level, that we don't know why we act the way we act. I said this to Dr. T many, many years ago. He was visiting Tuskegee, and we were walking around, and we came up to the statue where Booker T. Washington was pulling the veil of ignorance off of a Black male. That was an iconic statue.
Yes.
And I said, Dr. T, if our young boys knew who they were, if they knew they were kings and queens.
There you go.
If our children knew that they were kings and queens, they wouldn't act like thugs.
There you go.
Right. And I think that we have taught people to hate themselves. And then when they act out that hate on themselves, we wonder what's wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair assessment of what's happening, Dr. Mbili-Shaka?
Absolutely. You were sounding like Malcolm X just now in terms of who taught you to hate yourself. I also heard some hints of Amos Wilson in there in terms of negotiating how we developed a slave consciousness, right? We were not slaves when we were brought here, but we were enslaved. And what happened in terms of our language systems, right? Are we speaking the language of our ancestors, or is this a language that we were conditioned to speak? There's a Yoruba proverb, if you want to lie, speak English, right? So even thinking about how getting into that concept, or thinking about the slave consciousness in terms of the food, what foods were we given on a plantation? Were these foods that were enriching our gut health? No, these were foods that were left over in scraps, and we're continuing to eat those today. Just even thinking about clothes, what clothes are we wearing? were these the great clothes of our ancestors and textiles and fabrics that had meaning and significance from birth through death? Or are we wearing uniforms, right, of our work? Even thinking about what names we answer to, right? Because if you know your name, it's inscribed your life's journey. My name, Afia, means health. That's actually what my name literally translates to.
Amazing.
In Swahili. And so recognizing that by these given names, we're really losing out on our legacy, to know we are related to those kings and queens, just by, lineage and name. And just even to get on a spiritual level, like that slave consciousness being sustained and maintained is what gods do we worship, right? Were these the deities or orishas that our ancestors acknowledged? How do we bring in our ancestors into our daily lives as a means to cope with the trauma of being in the United States? So yeah, you reminded me of Amos Wilson just now.
Wow.
Hey, Mayor.
Go ahead.
I was just reflecting on Dr. Mbili Shaka's profile, where you talk about the need for returning the African rituals. Can you say something about the significance of rituals and our need to have more than the ones we have, especially at a time like this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love to define ritual using the Dagara ethnic group of Burkina Faso. Malidoma Some and Sabonfu Some, who are both ancestors now, define rituals a way we prepare our mind, body, and spirit to receive a blessing. And so I'm just thinking about, how do we go into this preparation stage and invocation to actually achieve certain things? And, since I'm a stylist and a clinical psychologist, I definitely acknowledge the role of ritual, right? Just in terms of that initial consultation that stylists and therapists do, to actually having this act performed of hair care or a therapy session, closing out, kind of gaining insight and next steps. So I think ritual is involved in how we prepare our food. Rituals involved even in the preparation for the Zoom tonight, right? In terms of how do we get ourselves ready? Sometimes we're so stuck on the routine of it that we miss the opportunity to really enjoy the process. And I think that in the journey, like in that process, is where healing takes place.
Thank you.
Man, that's powerful. Thank you so much. Let's move into this notion of Juneteenth. Can you imagine the Emancipation Proclamation taking place? People were freed, and for over a year and a half, people were in Texas not told that they were, in fact, legally free. I want you, Dean, tell me what you think the emotion was. Just based on your just intuitive self. What do you think our people felt when they found out that they were legally free?
I'm sure on the one hand, there would have been joy, right, to find out we're free, but also consternation. How is it we didn't know this all of this time? It's hard for us in 2022 to imagine, because we can communicate with people around the world in a minute. But the idea that even then knowledge did pass, people were using horses or trains or different things to get around, and yet that news had not gotten to this set of people. So for them to find out that, other people in the country knew that they were free and they didn't, must have been astonishing to them. But of course, okay, then they found out and you feel positive, but on the other hand, what are you supposed to do when all of a sudden you're free and you don't have resources and you don't, how are we supposed to manage now when they replace the legal slavery with de facto slavery?
Right. I want you to chime in, Dr. Romingson, there, because, again, slavery is not all chattel. It was Marcus Garvey that said it first. And of course, Bob Marley made it famous. He said, "Whence others may free the body, none but thine own self can free the mind." And so I want you to walk us through, this notion of one, Stockholm syndrome, where we oftentimes uh, was able to relate to our oppressor. You know, there are many people who worked in the house who felt a certain kinship, if you will, to the oppressor, and affinity for the oppressor. How do we navigate those things as we begin to extract ourselves from that institution?
Well, I mean, so when we spoke about, we didn't come as slaves. We were kings and queens and ran and ruled and were brought in, became enslaved people. So how do you keep a system like that in place for centuries? It's the psychological slave, creating the lie that Blacks were inferior, all things that were Black were ugly or uneducated. And so you perpetuate this lie. And then you also simultaneous promote that white is pure, white is good, or white is smart. And then from that lie, you build institutions, laws, police departments, schools, courthouses, all to promote and keep enforce that lie. And so when you have generations that are raised in that psychological untruth, you do have people that start to believe and buy into it. So you have young girls or young boys that may look at when you see an ad about someone who's wealthy, oftentimes who's depicted in those. When you hear something about a ghetto or a crime or drugs or gang life, who's often most depicted in those images. And so again, it's this perpetuation of this psychological damage that allows these things to still be in place. And so, yes, it's possible that after centuries of these lies and stereotypes being perpetuated, that some people do buy into it. So, well, this is who I am. These are my limitations. So, why not hide from it? Why try to push the envelope? Why try to be different? And so then you also have school-age children that say, well, talking a certain way is talking white or acting white, right? So those things that are seen as proper etiquette is now ascribed to the label of white. Where does that come from? The fact that we have school systems that don't tell the whole truth, they don't give the whole history. The posters in the schools don't affirm Black and brown children. And so it's right in our very own schools that these same stereotypes are being perpetuated. And so that psychological damage outlasts anything way further than chattel slavery ever did.
It's interesting. Dean, I want you to help me unpack this. I'm known to do a couple of things around the kitchen. I like cooking. And I know that once you put things into a dish, ingredients, right? And then you bake them, then you can no longer extract any of those ingredients individually because they're baked in. I want to ask you a question, Dean Wing. Is racism baked into American society?
Yeah, that's a wonderful analogy. And I think, yes, racism is baked into American society. Another analogy is that racism is a cancer on the American body public. Another analogy is, okay, in America, we have the salad bowl where we can not be baked, where we have all the different vegetables and cheeses and other things, and they're mixed in the bowl, but they do remain distinct versus the melting pot myth that, oh yeah, we're all just one big soup. And so there's various imagery we can use, but I often use in my work, racism is a cancer. Because if racism is a cancer, the treatment for racism are the treatments for cancer. If racism is just like a bee sting, oh, don't worry that they called you this bad name. Well, the treatment for a bee sting is a very minor treatment compared to the massive different types of therapies one would use for cancer. And unfortunately, America has treated racism as if it was some little bee sting or little bee stings, rather than look at it as a systemic cancer that will take systemic remedies that have never been tried. Many of us here, we got our degrees in an era where there was affirmative action. And so they let in a few of us into different institutions. But the fact that I'm a law professor and one of 5% of the lawyers that are Black does not lift up the masses of Black people in our country who still wallow in horrific situations with no wealth, lack of proper jobs and inferior education, et cetera. So, but I like your using of the baking. Yeah, it's racism is well baked into the American body, right?
You know, Dean, I'm gonna come back to that medical commissioner, health commissioner in the state of Virginia, knowing that you're going through your educational experience, being taught these things. Don't forget that's the same state where the governor was in blackface in his medical yearbook. Okay, so here's my question: when we have people who step out in that space like he did, and then have to clean it up, the question is that a re-education opportunity, or is that one where he's got to get off the island? How do we handle these issues when they come up so that, because they're going to keep coming up. This is why they don't want to talk about it. No one wants to step on the landmines. How do we look at that? And is it a re-education opportunity or evidence of that baked in racism?
You know, I think, as we all know, we do change in our lives. The things we did when we were in elementary, high school, college are not necessarily how we may view something today. I don't know about that particular governor, but people can change. So it can be a re-education opportunity for some people, but he was a politician. So he had to clean that up however he could try. And he was in medical school. He wasn't in fifth grade. And, you know, we have people in power today who have many things in there, not only their background, but what they have done currently.
Yes.
Look at the January 6th hearings, where they're getting the current, recent emails, text messages, et cetera, about what people really did and thought. And a lot of these people, I don't know if they're redeemable. Right? They're mad at getting busted.
Yes.
But they, and some people, as we know, they'll pretend, oh, I've changed, I'm different. And they're pretending, and other people, maybe honestly, they are changing. So
yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I want to pose this question to Dr. Mbili Shaka. You know, we talk about racism and we talk about slavery and its impact on the slave, but we don't talk about it as its impact on the humanity of the slave owner, right?
And their ancestry.
And their ancestors.
Yes.
Let's talk about it from that vantage point. You know, I was talking with Dr. Bernard Lafayette, and he said that the civil rights movement was not just the free Black folk, but also white folk.
Yeah.
And that those laws that prohibited Black people from doing certain things, there were also laws that prohibited white people from doing certain things. Like we couldn't go to the front of the bus, they can go to the back of the bus. Right. And so therefore they were in bondage as well. They just felt they were privileged bondage. All right. So I want you to talk about the fact or speak to the notion that this thing called racism can also destroy the soul of the oppressor.
All right, now I feel like you're making quotes from How to Be an Anti-Racist. You're well-read brother right now. I'm just thinking about also the book Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGruy, right? That she identifies not only was there trauma experienced by those who were enslaved, but what does it look like to enact human trafficking, genocides, rape, and other crimes, that we know that the majority of people who are currently enslaved in prisons, because slavery is legal, right? Right, Dean? I just right, the fourth and less in car. Okay. That I have a lot of relatives. I'm from New York. I have a lot of relatives who work at Rikers Island. And so, being in there 12 hours a day, watching people who are in prison. But I think about what it looks like when they come home, their energy, what they've witnessed, what they had to do to other people. They're not well. They're not well. I know I took my class on a trip. I don't know why. I guess I wanted to understand slavery better, to a prison in Maryland. My students were teasing me after, because I was just like frozen from the smells to the sights and different things that I experienced and witnessed. And that was just for 2 hours. But what does that look like for hundreds and hundreds of years to enact that type of violence? That it is continual. I'm sure it impacts their genetic, right? In terms of that intergenerational cultural transmission of what is healthy and normal. And yeah, just in terms of it's disgusting to think about what happened in this country and continues to happen every single day. And just to even think about how then this Constitution was made by people who were such criminals, and just how it's in every institution. I love the baking concept too, that just how it's in every single institution, from entertainment, education, economics, labor law, politics, sex, religion, war, and especially health.
Dr. Robinson, isn't the pandemic a sufficient disruptor that we can bake a new cake, that we can put new ingredients in? Isn't this been sufficient? A 100-year event gives us an opportunity to reimagine who we are and what we're doing in our institutions, especially in healthcare. They take an oath, all of them, to do no harm. And yet what we're talking about in the healthcare setting, the very things that we've seen happen during the pandemic are actual harms. They're not just incidental, they're actual harms. How do we address that?
I wish I could be that hopeful. I see COVID as an example for people to double down. I see it as an opportunity for people to see that some resources could be scarce. And so it's about, if I have influence, power, and money, I'm going to use it to support me and mine, and to hell with everybody else.
Wow.
I think it has exacerbated healthcare disparities.
Yes.
You think about even the initial rollout of vaccines, where they targeted, what stores offered them, how long inner cities had to wait for an appointment versus out in rural towns where some people didn't even believe that COVID was real, had an abundance of access. So you had individuals driving hours for care. So I wish it was an opportunity to reset. I think for those that fall within the poverty line, that may have been on the border of, conservative or liberal, that this may have been that wake-up call. But for the most part, I think, with that 1% where all the power lies, that it was an opportunity to double down. You look at price gouging that occurred as a result. Basic needs, groceries, gas. There was a story that came out that, everyone was saying that, all of these shipments were delayed due to COVID, when there were ships of containers sitting out in the ocean, just sitting there, right? And I definitely see it in a workplace where it's been an opportunity to double down, forcing people to come into work, forcing people with children to figure out childcare issues. And if you can't work, then you're terminated. Those having the luxury to work from home or being flexible, that are those in upper management. But for those that are on the ground that deal with it most, not having that option. And so when we look at that division of power, who most likely is not in that upper echelon of admin that gets that luxury. So I've seen it where it's exacerbated things versus being a reset button, unfortunately. But that just may be my dim viewing experience.
Yeah.
I wish it was a reset button.
I think there are many people would say amen, Dr. Robinson.
I'll say amen as well.
And
yet we can do our best to reset like we're doing right here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But let's talk about institutions, because we can have all of the intent in the world.
Yes.
But if you don't have the power, right? Power, the ability to supply or withdraw needed resources, right? The ability to create reality and get other folk to buy into it. That's what power is, right? And so when you don't have power, then you can pontificate and have these conversations, but institutions don't change with truth.
Amen. And that's where you get the frustration and the growing anger, which is an opportunity to channel that into energy and change, right?
Okay.
Because, you have Juneteenth that was signed onto the books last year. And so now you have some workforces that want to talk about it, have presentations. And so you have your Black staff that are at these events that are saying, okay, my job's acknowledging it. But what changes are you willing to implement to support that? Do we have that as a holiday, or are we still forced to work? Do we acknowledge Juneteenth beyond this one day? What does our DE&I policy throughout our corporation looks like? So yes, there are some buzzwords being thrown out there, but nothing's more frustrating than working for a company that has these fiery buzzwords on top, and the workplace is toxic and demeaning and as racist and discriminatory as the day is long. And so sometimes we do need to kind of start holding people accountable and holding feet to the fire.
Yeah. What I want to do is, Dr. Cooper, I want to tee you up, but I want to go to Dean for a second. Dean, you in law, and so we really just want you as one of our consultants, because you are such a valuable resource. It was Ava DuVernay who did the 13th. And then, of course, the new Jim Crow was done. And so people began to correlate slavery historically with the new slavery, mass incarceration. I want you to talk a little bit about how those two institutions conflate and how they may differ.
Well, I mean, it didn't just start with a book, of a documentary and the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. You have to go all the way back to the time of Du Bois, the first Black man to get a PhD from Harvard in 1896. There were incredible people who saw these things going on from the 1800s all through the 20th century. And so what we're dealing with now is the latest iteration, and using our technologies so that new generations of people become familiar with these situations. But we always need to pay homage to our ancestors, our sheroes and our heroes who passed away, who were dealing with these sorts of issues historically. And Du Bois and others, they went to the United Nations to make the case of racism existing in the United States.
We charged genocide.
We charged genocide. And of course, the US government was crushing that, didn't want us getting out of line. And we have Black people today who go to the United Nations and who have said the same kind of thing. So what we're dealing with, intersects and intertwines from the past up to the present and into the future. I've written a little article that talks about America 2050, where we are going to have apartheid in America, where the majority of people in America will be Black people and other people of color. But the white people who will be the minority, it'll be like in South Africa. White people are the minority in South Africa numerically, but they still control the economy. And so we will have that situation. A white minority will control the economy of the United States. It'll be global capitalism. We'll have the numbers. Hey, we could even have another Black president. We could have another Black president sooner than that. But even having a Black president or one of the few Black CEOs, it doesn't change the systemic racism. You can have your DEI office say, okay, now we have Juneteenth and we're going to have a nice luncheon, but it's not going to deal with these several hundred years of these structures. But I also have been doing a lot of reading. When you read back and you reread Du Bois, the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. Well, it's the problem of the 21st century. Reading all of these things, I think, is very helpful. And that's why they don't want us to read them. They want to ban us reading all of these things, and also ban us from reading things that are about the Holocaust. You know how they banned this comic book, the graphic book, Mouse. They don't want us reading about that because the rise of fascism that's happening in the United States is easier to read when it's a comic book than if you give somebody a big volume like Mein Kampf. So all of these things, I think, have to be looked at. And since most people don't have the time or energy to read these things, it's on people like us in our different professions who can talk about these things through the media and social media that we have, and great programs like this.
Dean, I've just come back from a trip overseas, and what surprises me is how they look to America as an example of the freedom, as an example of getting rid of the tribalism, and so we're held up as a model. Can you imagine what that does around the world when our model is undermined the way we're watching it be undermined?
Mm-hmm.
So I still believe that we can influence what happens, that what we do can influence that arc. It was Dr. King. What did he say? The moral arc of the universe is long, but what does it do? It bends toward justice. It doesn't bend by itself. We got to bend it. And Booker T and Du Bois showed us how to do that.
Yeah. We talked about this before, and I'm, Dr. T is the most optimistic person I know. And I'm so happy that he is, because he balances. We have with the balance each other. I say that gradualism is a little more than do nothingism, right? And that if you put a knife in me 8 inches and pull it out 4, that's not progress for me, right? And that we need to be able to demand justice, and now, not justice later. The people, we have gone generations, and look at what happened. 50 years, Roe versus Wade, all of a sudden gone, right? Voters' rights, opportunities, voter suppression, right back where it was. Dr. King and John Lewis and Dr. Bernard Lafayette and Hosea Williams and all of those people walked from Selma to Montgomery so that we could have voters' rights. Now they have voter suppression laws in almost 30 states, right? So when you continue to reverse accomplishments, then you really are not really making accomplishments. And this whole notion of democracy, and Dr. King was correct when he said that the mission of SCLC, and he wrote this on the window right before he died. He said the mission of SCLC was to redeem the soul of America. And we still are trying to do that. And America continues to fight because it does not want to share. It does not want to be this egalitarian society. It's never wanted to be that. It's not a meritocracy. It's never designed to be that. It's designed to make you think that you are not successful because of something inherent within you, not structural and systemic racism. And that's the work that we got to do, is to get America to understand that you can't continue to do this and be America, right? So that's the work we got to do. Can I bring up Dr. Sharon Cooper? Dr. Cooper, I apologize. I normally bring you up much earlier than this, but you see, I got all carried away. I got all shook up.
This is informative. This is necessary. Just some key points here. It just, at this point, it validates what slavery has done. We talk about moving that needle to building a culture of health. How can we build that culture of health when we're feeling the effects of slavery, systemic racism, and we're looking at generational illnesses? We talk about a good diet, but why can't we have these good diets? Because we're talking about food insecurity. We're talking about a depressed economic framework here. that makes it so that even those who wish to go to a college, we're talking about the lack of access. So how do we move that needle? And I'm going to agree with all the panelists. It's going to take actionable steps. We cannot become complacent. We have to move that needle. We have to, like Dr. T said, reimagining healthcare. And what that takes is not only bringing those particular services in the community to expose and educate, but also to educate our providers, making it a part of their curriculum. How do we understand culture? And it goes behind, beyond saying diversity, equity, inclusion. It's like the panelists said, providing those steps to validate this is where we need to go in order to effect change. So I see platforms like this as the catalyst to bring such efforts to fruition. And it's, for me, it's, of course, it can be depressing, but it's encouraging, because look how far through the efforts of, Mayor Neal, Dr. T, and all of you all, where we've come. And we only can serve as models, role models, to help to build that particular culture and trust. Because right now, with the latest political, economic, situation going on, it's eroding. That trust is eroding. So what do we need to do? And forums like this serve as those platforms to help us to identify solutions and addressing those matters.
One of the things, and we talked about you and Dr. T being tenured, we don't have a lot of people who are safe. Right. And so we don't.
I'm sorry, I'm not tenured, Dr.
You're not tenured.
No,
you're not tenured.
No.
Well, we want to get you tenured, right? That's the work. That's me speaking that into it. But what we have to do is we have to come up with ways to protect truth tellers.
That's right.
People who are transformational, not transactional, right? Because what we do is we have people who, through their ambition, leverage our pain for self-aggrandizement.
That's right.
Right? Rather than getting in position to make transformational change. And all of that, and much of that is out of fear that I will be hurt if I try to make some change. So I will acquiesce to the system and just get along to get along, and to go along to get along, in order for me and my foe and no more to survive.
Mayor O'Neal, I mean, when you say that, it just reminded me of, I watched a snippet of the insurrection trial, and I thought about the poll workers, right? Who were just doing their job because they took an oath to do their job and do it well, and literally had to move out of their homes, right? The FBI didn't come in and build a barricade and assign them detail. They called in and said, you might want to leave your house for a while. There's some death threats against you. Right. And so when they asked her, are you going back to work again, or others returning? She said, no. Who would want to go back and do that? Wow. So just because she did her job as a truth teller, now we've lost someone who was seen as a trusted and a person with amazing integrity, lost the will to do that. And psychologically has been harmed in the process.
Right.
Unfortunate.
May I just add something?
Go, please, Dr. Cooper.
One of my relatives told me, and it was so true, how can you find peace if you're in pieces?
Wow.
That's good.
And I said, wow, that's profound.
I like that.
So we need to get to the point, just like other people who took their lives and they were committed to move forward because they felt that this was worth addressing. So I think we all need to think in terms of, sometimes it's going to get a little uncomfortable, but in order for us to be comfortable, we got to go through some discomfort.
Right. And we got allies out there. We had Dr. Michael Osterholm on our show very early on in the process. And last week, his dedication for his podcast was about Juneteenth, social determinants of health, racism in healthcare. And when we get evidence of that, of someone using that privileged platform to echo our story, to acknowledge, to thank him, to bring him back on this show, let's bring him back on this show. You talk to him, he says, it is this show that gave him, educated him There's a whole lot of re-education that needs to go on. And just because a city says we're an anti-racist city, or here in the great state of Maryland, you can't get your medical license renewed until you complete implicit bias training. On the surface, that sounds really good. But if all you got to do is go online and do a 10-point quiz, okay, we need to do oversight on that. We need to monitor that. We need to call that out. All of our institutions are going through a reckoning. American Psychological Association, a reckoning of what they did to help bake in this racism. How do we monitor that or bring them on this show to articulate what they're doing to rectify the damage that's been done?
You know, one of the things, Dr. D, you know, we got to stop agreeing with window dressing.
Okay.
We know when something is not going to be effective, and we know that, right? We know when people are going through the motions just to say they did something, that they checked the box. And so we have to be honest and say that's not going to work, and because we know it isn't. And so to thine own self be true.
There you
so that's
go.
some of the work we got to do. Let's bring on Dr. Carol Ritter. She is she's one of us. She is our heart. Dr. Ritter, thank you so much. Dr. Ritter has been one of the stronger advocates for health equity for Black women. She talks about it, and I'm sure that in her world, in her circle, she makes a lot of people uncomfortable as she talk about racism in the healthcare profession. She's a gynecologist, but she is a regular contributor to the Cutting Edge. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Carol Ritter. How you doing?
Dr. Ritter, come on now.
Thank you.
We
Thank
love
you.
you,
It's
Dr.
good
Ritter.
to see you. I missed you all. Yeah, I'm wearing my heart because I have to remember, you know, like a ritual, right? I mean, this is like all comes back to why we are here on this earth, because we are all in it together and we love each other, right? Yes, but it just doesn't look that way. And I cried so much last weekend because I was lost. And then you don't, walk into a room, you don't know who is friend and who is foe. I mean, it doesn't even matter what the color of your skin is now. I don't know who's friend and foe anymore. Trying to figure out white women has been very challenging for me because we've been gaslighted our whole life. We have assimilated, just like you're talking about slavery. You learn to assimilate to be accepted. And then I look at the racism kind of like a COVID in the air. It's like, we're all breathing it, and, we all have been affected by it. And it depends on the degree of which you're exposed to it. Right. And then the degree which it's uncovered. We all need these Corsi Rosenthal boxes so to get racism cleared out of us. But I do believe that we can do it, but the truth takes courage to act on.
That's right.
And it's been very uncomfortable for me speaking to my white colleagues because they're being descendants of slave owners. They're not slave owners, but they're definitely the beneficiaries of it. But when you try to express that to them, there is a backlash, right? And then they don't hear you. So it's these conversations are very good, but it can be too jarring for some people. So I'm trying to figure it out. And your barbers and stylists, and this has been incredibly helpful for me. I appreciate it.
Baby, thank you so much. This work is not easy. If it were, we wouldn't need us. That's why we were called out. We've been called out to be called on for such a time as this, right?
There you go.
So that's why we're doing this. I want to do something. Meg, if you could come up. We do our public health minute, and I want to bring Meg up and kind of see where we are with COVID. Although we're talking about Juneteenth and issues of race and racism and all of that, we want to do it in the context of what's happening with COVID-19, because the impetus of us coming together in this space was COVID. And so we've expanded the conversation but we want to make sure that we stay focused on COVID, because COVID is still here and COVID is real. Meg Jordan, our public health minute.
Yeah. Before we get going, I just wanted to share something. Mayor Neal shared a book that he found that was very profound for him. And I'm at home this week, and I actually found a book that was really profound to me. My start in health and healthcare was in Planned Parenthood and at a youth group that was offered by St. Louis Planned Parenthood. And it is there I learned actually the system of oppression. This is where I got my start. And St. Louis Planned Parenthood is likely to be destroyed in the next year or so because of this recent court decision. And I just wanted you to know that the reason I am able to do what I do is because of Planned Parenthood. And that's just where I come from. So let's talk about the numbers. So we right now have 87.2 million cases of COVID-19 so far in this past 2 years. We have had 1.01 million deaths in the United States from COVID-19, and we have had 222.3 million Americans with those first two vaccines. We're going to get into vaccines and where we are in a minute. In this country, 106.3 million people have had their first booster dose, which is pretty great. Next, Maggie. We've been away for 3 weeks, so I wanted to officially announce this incredible news that we have all the vaccines now. We have 6 months and up can get vaccinated. We are here and we have arrived. So if you have a child in your life that is eligible for vaccination, your first stop is likely to be your pediatrician, but also you can find vaccines.gov is a government website which has vaccination sites across the country available. Next, please, Maggie. Okay, so this is challenging. So where we are, the orange you see on the map is where community level spread is high. These are all areas in the US that people should be masking indoors. Every adult, every person should be masking indoors. Yellow is where they indicate that people who have potential to have complications from COVID should be masking. And in low, the CDC has indicated that you should mask as you're comfortable. Take that as you will. So that's where we are with COVID spread level. Next, Maggie. So I also wanted to kind of check in. Where are we in COVID vaccines across the range of different shots? So next. Okay. So right now, on June 30th, 2022, 21.7% of the entire United States population has not initiated any kind of COVID vaccine. 21.7%. 78.3% of the entire US population has had one shot for COVID. 66.9% of the US population, the entire population, has had their two, so they're considered fully vaccinated. Of those people who got their second shot and are considered fully vaccinated, only 47.8% have gotten their first booster, about half. And then of those people who are eligible for a second booster, only about 27% of those 50 and up have gotten them. So if you know someone who still needs their booster, vaccines.gov also provides boosters. Or you can contact one of our wellness warriors, actually, too, because a lot of them are doing COVID boosters coming up in the next few months.
Yeah. Thanks so very much. Meg Jordan, who is our tech director, technical director, but also she does the Public Health Minute for us and give us information that we can kind of understand where we are on this journey as we deal with and address COVID-19.
Mayor, I just want to say that people can get overwhelmed with the numbers. I just want to point out this, the importance of the kind of infographics that Meg just put up. That's digestible, that you can kind of see where you are. You can do your COVID calculus. You're going to get on the plane, you're going to go to Florida, you better put a mask on. Those are the kind of decisions we need to make. And yet in those very places, Mayor, all of the cues to action have been taken down.
Right, right.
This is where our shops come in, our shops and salons, to make sure our community is still getting the word.
I don't know why we are not boosting the booster and pushing that. I think even the people in public health and in the medical industry, I think they got tired, they got weary and well doing, right? and they are not pushing it. And we do know that COVID is still here. Recently had friends to catch COVID. Full disclosure for me, I caught COVID, but because I was fully boosted, minimal symptoms, got through it like a champ. I only imagine, had I not been boosted, how that would have impacted me. And I felt comfortable that I could survive it.
That's right.
Because I knew that I was protected, and that that my being boosted was the reason for that. And so I'm going to now I have material for testimony, right? Right. So I can tell you unequivocally, emphatically, that it has helped me. And I believe, I'm not a physician, so I can't tell you what to do. I can say, I believe it will help you as well. What I want to do, Doc, we don't want this day to go by. I want my panelists to just tell me how you feel. So I want you to let's do the word cloud. Can we do that? Okay, let's do the word cloud. Let's do the word cloud just a minute as we continue our conversation. But just Dr. T, tee up the word cloud.
So just take a moment and think, how are you feeling right now at this moment in this pandemic? Those of you here in Hollywood Squares, those of you in the green room, and those of you out there in social media, and just type in that word one at a time, as many words that come to mind. Don't worry about spelling, just get it in there. We've got 60 seconds and the team will build a cloud. And the more people who say a word, the bigger that word will be. So just start putting those words in right now. How are you feeling right now at this moment in the pandemic? And, Mayor, over the past 2+ years, we literally have this cloud that we can show at some point in the show in the future, how it has ebbed and flowed. We got a pulse beat on what's going on in our communities. So just put those words in and
as many as you want to.
Absolutely.
Just keep them coming. Let's bring up Dorothy Reynolds. Let's go down to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff is not, you need to say Pine Bluff, right? Good. Hey, Dorothy Reynolds, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you all tonight?
Good. She is one of our stars. We are so appreciative of all you've done to provide a platform for shots at the shop. And so tell us what's happening down in Arkansas.
Well, we conducted 2 rounds of shots in the shop, as you said earlier, totaling 38 people. We also conducted an outreach program with the Arkansas State Health Department, Minority Health Department. And that was Arkansas Beauty and Barbershop Outreach Program. And we had 37 people to come to be tested for high blood pressure, diabetes, and HIV and AIDS. And we gave $25 gift certificates, which I think helped a lot. But we had people, as we were closing, we conducted this from 10 to 3. As we were closing, we had people still coming, wanting to come and get tested. We had some homeless people there that were really concerned about whether they had COVID, but we were not testing for COVID. So we had some resource material to tell them where to go and get tested for COVID and how to get the free kits. to take back to the Salvation Army. But we have had a lot of people supporting us. We've been conducting surveys in our beauty and barbershop. We fortunately have had more participants from the barber side than from the beauty side. And right now, the city of Pine Bluff is about to launch a program where they actually want to go into the beauty and barbershops, but people are planning for the hair show that's going to be in Atlanta, so they don't have time. So they're doing it in the churches. And I did offer to help because so many of the people are the same people who came to us, but it's called Advancing Health Literacy throughout our community. And we have developed some flyers. I know you might not be able to see them, but
we can see.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. This one is on mental health.
Love it.
This one is on mental health and COVID-19. This one is on who to contact for health issues in Pine Bluff.
Okay.
And this one is on COVID, diabetes, and COVID-19. This one is on heart health and COVID-19. This one is on physical wellness and COVID-19.
Wow.
You know,
she's
Ms.
on the
Reynolds,
ball, isn't she, man?
I am just
always.
so
Just give us some
excited.
snaps. I mean,
That's right. Let's snap it up. Come on now.
Give
Come
us
on
some
now.
snaps. We're so appreciative of that kind of stick-to-itiveness and creativity. Go ahead, Dr. T. What do you say?
Yeah, well, she gives me hope. She had no idea she'd be involved in this kind of thing. And now she's a champion in her whole state. We had her, the state health department come into these Hollywood squares and say they were inspired by Dorothy Reynolds. And you know what? She's also fearless, going up to young people. Sometimes folks are afraid of our young teens. She went up to the young teens, engaged them, and they listened to her. We got to do more of that. We got to save ourselves with more Dorothys around the country.
Yeah, well, Dorothy Reynolds, we love you so very much. Thank you so much for all you do, both seen and unseen. Let's go to the cloud. Let's see what we think and feel collectively. The cloud is
all right. Here we go. Wow.
Hopeful, motivated, blessed, loved. And interesting, people are mourning because there have been people who have had loved ones to die.
That's right.
And even with just the constant disruption of our daily activities due to COVID, there is a sense of sadness. But people are empowered. They are resolved, and they have community-based programs. They are inspired. Some people are numb, and
that's right.
Some people are worried and equity focused and challenged. But if you look at the determined, but if you look at thankful, hopeful, and motivated, loved, and blessed, well, we in the house, right?
Hey, Mayor, you talk about I'm being optimistic. This has been the theme of our clouds over the past 2+ years.
No doubt about it. Yeah. I think that when you are around people who can affirm you, people who can recognize your truth, right? And appreciate your perspectives, I think it does give us hope. I think we are grateful for these moments we have together, and that we are motivated to move forward, and that love is leaving others very encouraged.
There you go.
All right. So we're doing this, and we know that we are blessed by the best, right? So all of this is what's happening, man. Thank you so much. We have 7 minutes.
Can you believe that?
Before we have to call it a day. Dean Wing, do you see how we do this thing? This is what we do on the cutting edge. I want to talk a little bit from the vantage point, and I want Dr. M. Billy Shaka and Dr. Robinson to help us out, because we can continue to talk about and restate the problem. But we do need to get to solutions, right? And we need to get not only in philosophical areas, but practical spaces, right? So Dean, I want you to help me to navigate to some practical things we can do. I reiterate what I said: whence others may free the body, none but thine own self can free the mind. I am convinced that this institution at this country cannot free Black folk. Black folks have to free Black folk. Am I wrong for saying that, Dean Wing?
Yes, that is true. The biggest thing that we can do is that in November, for the November election of this year, we've got to get a turnout in not only the Black community, but in other communities, so that we can get a bigger margin in the Congress. Because if we can get a bigger margin, whether there's the filibuster thing or not, that would help pass some laws that will help push back against these reactionary court cases that have already happened and that are to come. So to me, that's the biggest thing. But that requires coalition building, because we can't do that alone. And Black women, 94% of us voted for the Democratic Party, for Obama, et cetera, is important, but that's not enough. We have to have other groups and types of people joining us this November. I'm not talking about 2 years from now, but the election this fall, that will be so critical. And drumming up the young people and also those of us in the boomers, et cetera. We need all the generations that will be involved in this.
So Dean, you think voter registration through the barbershops and salons is a good idea?
Sure, of course, that's so critical, and of course this show is great for that, and we have to be able to do that, because meanwhile, as was mentioned earlier, there's all these voter suppression laws that have been passed that we don't even understand yet the implications of all those laws being passed that are going to make it harder for people to vote or for their registrations to be validated, et cetera. So we've got to really get a lot of people who aren't registered at all yet, and also to verify for people who think they're registered, and also be prepared that in some of those states they're talking about, oh, you can't give people water. We're going to be in line 8 hours, right? So we have to deal with all of those kinds of manifestations as if it was before the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Okay. All right.
You're right. I developed a concept called vote and remove all doubt. That's I'm going to push that. I develop concepts, but I believe that it cannot be close. We really got to win big, so it cannot be questioned. Because if it's close, it will be questioned. And so vote and remove all doubt. Let's go to Dr. Marber. Thank you. Hold up, Dean Adrian Wing. Love you. Thank you so much for all you do, both seen and unseen. Dr. Marber Robinson, tell us what do we need to do? What can we do practically?
Well, I think that for me, psychologically, there has to also be balance, right? So we want to do the work and push the movement forward. So I was just working with the group earlier, and so everyone challenged themselves to find just 2 people and get them registered to vote. So that's the work aspect, but there also has to be that balance of self-care. So joining organizations or groups of like-minded people where you can vent and process and not feel judged or looked at strange is also important. Do things that feel good for you. The Association of Black Psychologists has what's called Sawabona healing circles. And so those are also offered virtually. So being able to plug into something like that, where you can spend an hour being able to decompress and be with like-minded people is good. The Community Healing Network still has emotional emancipation circles, and those also offered throughout the country. And so being with like-minded people to learn different techniques and ways and skills of emotionally emancipating yourself from the lie of Black inferiority. And then, like I said, in connecting with other people. Right? We cannot be in silos. We cannot carry this burden individually, but instead of pulling away and isolating, I think it's so important now more than ever to lean forward and plug into others.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned the emotional emancipation circles, Dr. Enola Aird, attorney Enola Aird. In fact, I was the chair of the advisory board for that organization.
She is my shero. I love her.
Absolutely.
We'll get that in our newsletter, Mayor.
Oh, absolutely. Just a wonderful person. Dr. Maya Angelou was the chair of the advisory board, and when she passed, I became the chair. So it's that kind of power in that organization. So you need to look at that, communityhealingnet.org, right? All right, Dr. Afia and Billy Shaka.
There you go.
I'm giving you the power. You got the last word.
Come on now.
Yeah, I would push the message of survive. There are over 60,000 Black women missing in this country right now. I think about what would prevent, as Sister Soldier had a song, slavery to go back into effect. I don't think voting would stop that per se, because they wouldn't respect, that concept of not benefiting from our free labor. But I'm just thinking about what you can do from the morning to nighttime on a daily basis of drinking at least 64 ounces of water a day.
Okay.
Of eating at least 4 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables.
There you go.
Sleep 7 to 9 hours a night.
All right.
Exercise for at least 30 minutes, 4 to 5 days a week, and learn self-defense.
There you go.
I'll stop there.
We can promote all that.
We can. That as Dr. T, that's putting it where the cows can get it. Right?
You got that right. Get to your barbershop and salon to get your supplies and your encouragement. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Safe house on the Underground Railroad. All right.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for us. Dr. T, love you, man. Thank you so much. Dr. T was out on vacation, and you can tell he's refreshed, rejuvenated, resuscitated, and ready to go. So thank you thank the universe for bringing you back safely to us. And
yes,
let's get ready to rock and roll. To all of you, Dr. Ritter and Dorothy Reynolds, and to our team behind the scene, thank you all so much for what you do. To this just incredible panel. You all are so incredible. The words of wisdom reverberate and will continue to for henceforth and forevermore. As always, I like to leave you with these 2 words. Remember that I love you with a perfect love. But more importantly, remember this: you got the power. Thank you for joining with us on this segment of The Cutting Edge.
See you next time.
And we'll see you next time on the 14th.